Hi KX, we're back with the Iliad by Homer. And I have to say, I've been really enjoying your responses to the queries about what was surprising and what was unexpected and what you thought of. One of the things I remember is Kai mentioning that he thought it was surprising that the people who started the war didn't want to fight. And actually, that is a big idea that runs throughout the Iliad, which is surprising because it is, as Rosie said, it is a lot of war and fighting, and something Ellie also mentioned. And it is violent at the same time. Unless you've read the story, now you all will have known the story. It is really as much about fighting as it is about the cost of fighting and why we shouldn't fight, you know? And sadly, sometimes you have to do something. I mean, sometimes it works out well. You have to, let's say, get on a horse and ride a horse to learn how to ride a horse. And sometimes people have to make mistakes before they really learn. And so, yes, Kai, it is surprising that all these people that were so eager to fight now don't want to fight. And particularly if you think about Achilles, who's the greatest warrior the Greeks had. There's a whole, if you read the grown-up version of the Iliad, there's a whole conversation Achilles has. These a couple good conversations, and he does talk a lot about this idea of not wanting to fight, but feeling like he has to. I think we read that one. I think we're up to Greek on a run, right? So here we go. The next morning, Zeus watched as the two armies woke and prepared to fight. At sunrise, the Greek chariots charged through the strong new gates and down onto the plain. Immediately, the Trojan chariots flew out of the city to meet them. Metal clashed as the two armies met, and the soldiers bellowed their war cries at one another. Soon screams rang across the plain. Neither army would give ground. But at midday, Zeus took out his golden scales and held them high. Into one pan he put death for the Trojans, into the other death for the Greeks. Holding the balance, can you see? Right here. Holding the balance steady, he waited to see which death carried more weight. Interesting. Slowly, inexorably, the Trojan side rose into the air, and the Greek side sank down toward the earth. And here I think of something Noah said, when Noah said he thought it was surprising or unexpected that the gods were deciding who wins, right? It wasn't how well you fought or luck or anything. It was the gods deciding everything for you. Zeus acted at once. His thunder rolled over the Greek army, and he sent a flash of lightning slicing down among its soldiers. The Greeks were terrified. They knew that Zeus was against them. The lightning is a big clue, right, KX? And they lost all hope of winning that day. So that's the thing. If you with this belief system, if you think that the gods decide and not you, and you start to believe that you're losing because the gods don't want you to win, does it encourage you to keep fighting or trying? No, right? It makes you want to give up, because what's the point? Turning their chariots toward the ships, they raced back to safety behind their new wall. But old Nestor, remember he's the oldest king fighting on the Greek side, couldn't retreat. Paris had shot one of his chariot horses. The poor animal was thrashing his hooves as it tried to dislodge the arrow. Nestor was left all on his own, stranded in the middle of the battlefield. That's because the way a chariot works, the engine of the chariot, if you will, is the horse. And if you don't have a horse to pull the chariot, your chariot doesn't work. He jumped out of his chariot and slashed at the wounded animal's reins, trying to let the other horses free. Hector saw him and seized the chance to attack. He snatched the reins from his charioteer and turned his own horses quickly, urging them across the battlefield. With his other hand, he held his spear up, ready to strike. Diomedes spotted what was happening. He shouted an order to his charioteer, and they all turned and raced toward Nestor. As he went, Diomedes bellowed to Odysseus, "Stop running away. Nestor needs our help. We must save him from that Trojan." He was wasting his breath. Odysseus couldn't hear him above the turmoil of the battlefield. Diomedes realized he would have to save Nestor on his own. Sweeping toward the old king's chariot, he called down to him, "Leave the charioteers to cut your horses free while we go deal with Hector. We'll teach him a lesson." Diomedes' charioteer jumped down, and Nestor leaped eagerly into his place. Taking up the reins, he turned the horses around, with Diomedes behind him. As soon as they were near enough, Diomedes threw his spear at Hector's charioteer, killing him. So in the chariot, our chariots don't have a lot of room, so you usually have one person driving the horses, and then one person fighting, at least one person fighting. So what has happened now is Hector has lost his driver, if you will. Hector was devastated to see his charioteer fall to the ground, but there was no time to mourn. That's a word we don't see very often, is it? Charioteer. Diomedes and Nestor were heading toward him at top speed. Snatching at the reins, he pulled his horses to a stop and yelled for someone else to come and drive his chariot. I think he's finding it difficult to multitask, to drive the chariot and to fight. Diomedes' chariot swung around. He was ready to attack again, but Zeus had other plans. There was a terrifying clap of thunder, and a bolt of lightning hit the ground right in front of Diomedes' horses. They shied and skittered back, and Nestor dropped the reins in terror. Zeus is against us, he shouted. We must get back to the ships. We don't stand a chance of winning today. Diomedes was horrified. You're asking me to run away from Hector? Do you want him to call us cowards? Who cares what he calls us? Everyone knows you're not a coward. Nestor picked up the reins again and turned the horses, sending the chariot racing toward the shore. Hector gave a triumphant roar. You're a weakling, Diomedes, a rag doll. I'll see you down in Hades with the dead before you break into Troy. Diomedes grabbed the reins. He would have pulled the chariot around and charged at Hector, but a second crack of thunder made him think again. Dropping his hand, he let Nestor whip up the horses. They raced back to the wall with the Trojan charioteers close behind them. Galloping through the gates, they found themselves in a wild tangle of horses and harnesses. The Greek chariots were crammed in among the ships, and the soldiers were scurrying around in panic. They thought the Trojans would come sweeping in through the gates before there was time to pull them shut. Agamemnon jumped onto the prow, which is the front of the ship, of Odysseus' ship, holding a great purple cloak. He waved it in the air to catch everyone's attention. Shame on you all, he yelled. When we first came here, you boasted about how many Trojans you were to defeat. What's happened to all that spirit? Are you going to let our enemies overrun the beach without even trying to fight back? He lifted his arms to heaven, calling out desperately to Zeus, Mighty Father, remember all the sacrifices I have made to you, and hear my prayer. Save our lives. Zeus did hear him and sent a sign. A huge eagle came flying overhead, dropping a young deer. As it flew over the Greek camp, the eagle dropped the deer right next to the altar where Agamemnon made his sacrifices to Zeus. When they saw that, the Greeks turned to fight again. They attacked so fiercely that the Trojans were driven away from the wall and back across the trench. Hastily, the gates were closed and barred behind them. For that night, at least, the Greek army was safe. So here again, KX, you have an idea. This idea of sacrifices, and what really it is it's kind of like saying to the gods, I'll give you this if you do this for me. That idea of what we call reciprocity. You're not going to help someone because it's the right thing to do, but you're going to help them because you are giving them something and they are giving you something. Which, does that sound like the way we want to live our lives? I don't think so. So that's the end of that chapter. Oh no, we got a little more. But Hector knew he had the upper hand, and he didn't mean to lose it. He wouldn't allow his soldiers to retreat into the city. Instead, he told some of them to collect firewood and sent others back into Troy to fetch supplies. He ordered them to make camp out on the plain between the city and the Greek ships. That night, 1,000 campfires burned on the battlefield. The air was filled with the crackle of flames and the smell of roasting meat. 50 men feasted around each campfire. Beside their chariots, the horses stood ready, munching barley and rye to give them strength for the next day. Hemmed in behind the wall, the Greeks could hear their enemies rejoicing. They were filled with fear as they looked across at the red glow of the campfires, drowning out the stars. And then here comes the next chapter, which is pleading, or sort of really trying to convince someone, persuade someone, pleading with Achilles. And this makes me think of something Rowan said, where Rowan said, I'm surprised they're still fighting so fiercely when they don't have their best fighter, who is Achilles, right, Rowan? And that was surprising, too. I hope you enjoyed this chapter.